Hello, welcome to this next Blender tutorial. In this tutorial we're looking at Blender 3 and it's a very basic guide for somebody who's never opened Blender before, whether they're a complete newcomer to 3D modeling, or perhaps they've used another package and they need a bit of an orientation. So when you launch Blender you get this little dialogue here. This picture may vary depending upon the version you've got downloaded. You can see I'm on 3.1.2 here. So down here we have lots of different options, but we're just going to pick general to start with, which will give us a general modeling scene to work with. Okay, so one of the first things that I ever want to know in a 3D program is how do I navigate around my object. So for Blender, and I've got like a pop-up down here which will show you what keys I'm pressing. If you press Alt and use the left mouse button, you can rotate around your object, which is lovely. If you press Shift Alt and left mouse button, you'll pan. And if you press Control Alt and left mouse button, you can zoom in and zoom out. Now, just a bit of a note here, if I throw that miles away, sometimes you can get a bit lost as to where your object is. It happens to me all the time. If that happens, if you press the period key on the number pad, it will recenter your selected object. It's no good if you haven't got anything selected. It just doesn't do anything. But if you come over to your scene browser here, we can select our cube and press full stop, and it will come back to it. Now I said whoops there because I do that quite often. If you're not pointed at this window, it doesn't work. So I can press full stop as much as I like with anything selected and nothing's going to happen. It's only when I'm in this 3D view that will show up. I promise you that's foxed me a few times and still does, because I'm not very bright, basically. Okay, so that's a bit of viewing around your object. In the next we'll go into some more of the interface pieces. We'll look at switching modes and some of the windows we have to look at. Okay, so I shall talk to you then. Okay, so the next thing I'd like to look at is splitting the screens. You can split your screens in many ways, or in many subdivisions in Blender, and it took me a little while to get my head around it, so I thought I'd include it in this. So you can see my cursor at the moment is a normal cursor, but if I point up in the top corner there, top right, I get a little cross, and that's indicating it's the right spot to split. So if I left click and drag to the left there, I get two screens, and if I then further want to split this in another way, I can click there and drag down and I'll subdivide this into two. So that's terrific, but why would I want to do that? Well, perhaps I want a left or a right side model or view, so I can press 1 on the keypad and that will be my front, and I can press 3 on the keypad and that will be my right hand view. And now I've got my perspective view over here. It's perfect. I may even want one of these two to be completely different. I might want to see the UV, for example, or the UV editor. So the window mode is controlled by this little box up here, and it gives you all of your different options. And if I click UV editor there, I've now got my UV view. And for down here, perhaps I want to look at the shader editor, and I can get my shader editor down there. Now, one of the things that really foxed me on this is, well, I've got all these views, but I just want to get back to the single view. So, how do I do that? Well, if you hover over the boundary between the two, you'll get this left-right arrow, or up-down arrow if it's vertical. If you right-click there, you can join the areas, and then you click in the area you wish to join from and to, and it will join in. So if I want to get back to a single view here, so I'll right click here, join areas, and I'm going to join to there, and right click there, join areas, and I want to join to the top one from bottom to top, so I click in the top and I'm back to where I need to be. So that's switching and well, you know, splitting windows and then joining them back together again. So to split a window, top corner, click and drag to the left or to the bottom, and it will split your window. If you want to join them back together again, then you can hover over the division between them, right click and join areas, and then point to the one that you want to get rid of, essentially. So I'm going to now join this one over here to this one over here, and there it is. Okay, so that's splitting windows. So I'll talk to you in the next section. Okay, so when we're you know, doing different things within Blender, you might want to be, you know, completely different functional window. For example, I can't UV map in this current layout. I can't, you know, do texture painting in this current layout or design a shader. So there are some preset views that come with Blender. So we have a layout area which has got the animation down the bottom. We've got the modeling, which has got all the modeling tools but no animation line at the bottom. We've got the sculpting, which has got all the sculpting tools down one side, and if I pull that out I can even see their names. We have the UV editor, we have the texture painting tools, shade editor, animation, rendering, compositing, I don't know how to say it, apparently, geometry nodes and scripting. But as I said in the previous one, you can always, you know, split one of your other windows to, you know, do that itself. So for example, if you, whoops, that was the wrong button, and that's the wrong spot, there we go. I can always come in here and do a quick, okay, well I want to use my UV editor for a moment, so I'll switch into the UV editor by selecting it from up here, and then do my UV editing, and then I can merge those together and carry on. Whoops, I did that the wrong way around, didn't I? Okay, well in which case I'll just set that back to the 3D viewport. Okay, so you know, that's a little bit about, you know, where some of the different tool sets are. In the next bit I think we're going to have a look at the viewport and setting it to different modes, you know, depending upon, you know, what you want. Okay, I'll stop waffling, back in a moment. Okay, so the viewport render mode, let's have a look. So up here we have the different render modes. So we have wireframe, we have flat shaded, we have texture shaded, and we have fully rendered. So the fully rendered, if you know you're in default mode, you'll probably find is in Eevee. So Eevee is, you know, the quicker of the two, I'm guessing. But if you switch over to cycles, you'll get a much more, how can I put it? Not a much more. You'll get the cycles renderer, which is much nicer, I think. That's my opinion. Yeah, other people can disagree. That's fine. Okay, so on top of that, if you look at this little drop down here, you get options as to how it can be seen. So in this case, whether we see the lights or not, or the world. So the world is basically the HDRI sitting behind it. If we go to the textured renderer, we get the same options. We also get, I can't remember now whether I saw it down here, yes, the render pass. So under here we have all the different render passes that are happening all at the same time. So currently we have the combined render, which has combined everything together, and we can go down here and just look at the shadow render. So it gives us what's in shade, what's not in shade. So we have all of our different passes here, and we can, use those for various things. So got emission there. I've got no emission going on, so it's black. So let's pop that back to combined. Excuse me. Okay, so the one with the most sort of interesting options, in my opinion, is the flat shaded, because when we go flat shaded, we have different options to look at. So we have studio options, so which sort of studio we want. So we can change the way the lighting behaves. We can change the matte cap we're using. So for sculpting, for example, you might switch to this red clay here, which gives you a much more, sculptish view. It's just easier to see, essentially. When I've been doing it and I sculpt in the normal mode, tendency to white out. You can't see details, little bumps you've put in, and so on and so forth. But if you use this clay texture, you get a much better view. What else have we got under here? Well, we can put backface culling, which will speed things up a bit, because essentially it's not even considering anything that's not in view. I mean, you can't see that it's not in view at the moment because it's not in view. But if you have a particularly high poly model, I imagine that might speed you up a little. We have an X-ray mode. The X-ray mode I generally use when I'm doing selecting. So in X-ray mode, you can select sort of both sides of a model all at the same time, whereas if you're not in X-ray mode, you cannot. There's a couple of ways to access that. You can either click this little icon up here, which puts you into X-ray mode, or a quicker keyboard shortcut, Shift Z. So if you go Shift Z, it puts it into wireframe and transparent, and if you put Shift Z back again, it puts it back into the mode you're in. I just find it easier because those two keys are, my fingers are usually pretty close to them, so it's convenient to do it that way. What else have we got? We have shadows, so whether we're going to render shadows or not. We have cavity. Now, I don't know if you noticed that, but these edges highlighted when I turn that on. If I turn it off, we should see those go away. So when you have a detailed model, it has some cavities, it has some sharp edges. It will highlight those and give you a good visual representation. Then we have depth of field and outline and specular lighting. Yep, there we go. Just on the shadow, you can change the strength of your shadow, depending upon what you're doing, I guess. You might want a stronger shadow, might give you a better, visual look to, be able to do, the changes and such like you want. Because this one you use in editing mode, essentially, in, when you're building a model, rather than in rendering, which you might do for artistic purposes, but in general, this is for creating. Okay, so that's a little bit about the render modes. What will we look at next? I think we'll probably go into edit mode and start looking at some selection methods. So I'll talk to you then. Okay, so before I go too much into selection, I'm just going to, I'm in object mode, and I'm going to press the delete key to get rid of that cube, and then we'll add in a sphere. Let me just get rid of that. So add mesh and UV sphere. There we go. Okay, so this is much easier, or much nicer to demonstrate on. So I'll press tab to go into selection mode, or edit mode rather. And then I can change the element I'm selecting up here. So I've got vertex, edge and face, and I can cycle between those by pressing the 1, 2 or 3 key on the main keyboard. The 1, 2 and 3 key on the numpad do different things. They're for cameras. Okay, so if I select vertex here and select a single vertex, and then with the shift key held down I can add to my selection, and you'll notice when you have all the elements of a polygon selected, it will highlight. Similarly, if you have all the elements of an edge selected, the edge will highlight. So it just gives you an idea of what's going on. And Blender is not necessarily all that fussy about how you've selected a polygon. If you then activate a polygon tool, for example extrude or inset, it will act on the polygon you have selected. So even if you're in vertex mode, you can then go inset. Let's do that. If I'm in vertex mode and I do an extrude, so extrude region, it will act on the polygon that I have selected, even though I'm really in vertex mode. Okay, so let me undo that. There we go. Okay, so you can select and then press shift to select other things. Let me switch that back to selection, and that's all well and good. You can also use your left mouse to drag box, but it will not select the back side of the model or the hidden side of the model in this mode. You have to activate your X-ray. So with Shift Z, let's get into a front view or a more frontal view. There we go. I can box select and then press Shift Z again, and I'm selecting all round. So that X-ray mode is primarily for selection and to help you select as much as you need to any one time. Okay, what else is there? So we have loop selection. So if I go into polygon mode and double click on the middle of a polygon, it won't do anything because it doesn't know which direction to go. So if you point at the edge that's pointing in the direction of the loop you want to select and double click, it will select that loop. So if I press the left or the right and double click, or top or bottom, and it will go vertical, so horizontal or vertical. And that works for edges as well. So if I double click on this edge, actually it doesn't matter where I double click that edge because it knows the direction of the edge. It will select the loop in that direction. So if I select a horizontal edge, it will go horizontally, and a vertical edge, it will go vertically. Let's have a look at polygon, vertex rather. So vertex works more or less in edge mode. If you double click on a vertex, it will attempt to select the one that it thinks is right. But you don't need to actually select directly on a vertex. If you select directly on a vertex, it will go in a particular direction. But if I select just to the right of a vertex, you see it's now going horizontally. And if I select below the vertex, it's going vertically. So, just be aware that you don't have to be exactly on something to actually select it. Basically, Blender will pick the nearest item for you. So this horizontal edge is going to go horizontally no matter where I click, and these vertical ones are going to go vertical no matter where I click, except to say that the vertex is, if I select that vertex and double click above it, it's going to go vertically, and if I double click to the side of it, it will go horizontally. Yes, that's about that for selection so far. What we'll have a look at next is, I did have it in my mind, we'll have a look at some, perhaps a tool or two to, get us started. So I'll talk to you then. Okay, so we're in edit mode. It goes without saying that you can't edit a model, if you're not in edit mode. And if I just want to move some of these things around, I can select my the piece I want to move. And then if I press the G key, G for grab, I can then move it around. Now, if I do that, from a perspective view, it's going to use my view angle to figure out which way to move it. But if I want to constrain it into a particular axis, I can press the axis I want. So if I say X, just press the X key, it's only going to move it in the X axis. If I press Y, it will only move it in the Y axis. And for people that use other applications that just started with Blender, Y is front to back rather than up to down. Up to down, up and down. So Z is vertically and, well, vertically up or down. Now, if I get to the point where I decide that I don't want to move this element, I can just press the right mouse button and it will snap back to where it started. So let's just select a couple of bits and bobs here. So if I press G, it will move according to the angle I'm looking at. Y, in and out. X, left to right. Z, up and down. Now, if I want to move it in a combination of axes, basically you press Shift and the axis you want to exclude. So if I press Shift and Z, it's now going to move in X and Y. If I press Shift and Y, it will move in Z and X, and Shift and X, and it will move in, I've lost count, Y and Z. There we go, Y and Z. Okay, and again, if I right click, it will go back to where I started. So if you're in, say, the front view, and you press G, basically it's only going to move in Y. Z in this case. If you're in the left view, or the right view in this case, it will only move in X, and so on and so forth. Okay, so yeah, and that's basically works for the other options as well. So if I press the S key, it will scale what I have selected, and it will scale it according to your camera angle, and it will also scale it according to how far you move your mouse. You see I've got this little arrow and this dark line. It's basically, that's giving me a visual idea of, whether I'm going up, down or otherwise. So again, if I just press the Z key, it's only going to go in the Z axis, the Y key, the Y axis, and the X key, the X axis. And right click will send me back right to where I started. So R is rotate, and again, I'm in perspective mode. So it's going to take that view and try and angle it accordingly. If I press Y, it will rotate around Y, X will rotate around X, and Z will rotate around Z. And say Shift Z will do X and Y. And right click to go back to where I wanted to. What else is there to say about that? Well, I mean, that's the basics. I found it really difficult because I was very much used to having a gizmo like this, and then I can just move it where I want to without pressing lots of keys. But actually, once you get used to it, oops, that's the wrong one. Once you get used to it, it's quite intuitive. So I would suggest practicing. So it's G for move, and then the axis you want to move it on, or Shift and the axis, and then S to scale, and then again you can constrain by the axis by pressing that key, and R to rotate. Okay, so that's a basic movement. I guess we should have a look at a typical tool or two, just for now, just for fun. So we have a bunch of tools down here, but they're not the only tools that we have to work with, of course. So if with a polygon selected, either via face mode or having all four vertices selected that make up that polygon, we have inset and we have extrude here. Now these are ones I use really often. So inset essentially will inset that polygon along its kind of surface. So you'll see that's just, you know, taken that in there. And, you know, for all tools, when you activate it, you'll generally get a little pop-up down here which gives you the options for it. So you can type in exactly how far you want to do this. So if I, this is in meters, so if I wanted to do it 10 centimeters, I would type in 10 centimeters. Actually, I've probably got shift caps lock there. Oh no, that's just way too far. If I want to do it 1 centimeter, it will inset by 1 centimeter. So you can get really kind of precise with it. So once you've finished with that tool, basically you will be in it until you tell it not to be. So it will always be selected here. So I find that a bit odd. Yeah, I'm used to having a key which I can press like escape or Q to quit to come out of that mode. But in this case, you just go back to one of these other options up here like the select mode, and that will cancel it. Another way of doing it is by the keyboard shortcut. And for inset, that is the I key. So press I, and I can move my gizmo to set it, or I can even go down to my tool options here and type in how much I want to do it, and job done. Now the advantage of that is once you've done that, the tool isn't active anymore, so you don't have to keep switching in and out. Similarly, we have extrude options. So extrude will say take that face and extrude it out along its normal. Well, yeah, that's one mode. So if you just click extrude here and then pull on this handle, it will extrude out. There we go. And if I stop and then extrude again and extrude again, it will add to that operation. So you see I've got 3 sections here instead of just one. Let me just press Ctrl Z to go back to normal. Again, my tool is still active here, so I need to come out. And if I want to do that via a keyboard shortcut, that's E. So I just press E and then move my mouse to extrude it in and out. But again, once I've finished, the tool is dropped and I don't need to, you know, unselect that tool. There are options for this, and if we go to here and just left click on it, we have different extrude methods. So we've got region, we've got manifold, we've got along normals, extend individual, and extrude to cursor. Okay, so let me, whoops, yeah, that's extrude to cursor. See, I'm just clicking and it's extruding to whatever point I click at on the screen. Not very useful in that particular context, but handy nonetheless. So let me click off that and select a bunch of things here. Now, if on the inset side of things, if I press I once here, it will try and inset them all together as a single selection. But sometimes you don't want that, like on window panes and things like that. So let me Ctrl Z that. And if I press I twice, whoops, and then get my mouse under control, you'll see it individually insets each of those pieces. Now a lot of the tools behave in this way. They behave in very similar ways. There is a keyboard shortcut, which generally I find a little bit more intuitive, though sometimes it takes a while to learn them. Or you have the other options down the left hand side, but you also have up here some more actions. So under the face menu we've got extrude, extrude along normals, inset, poke, triangulate, etc, etc, etc. So just be aware that there's more than one place to access a tool. The other option is if you press the space bar, you get a search context up. So if I press space and then type in extrude, we get all the extrude options down here. So we've got extrude faces, we've got extrude individual faces. These are all individual anyway, so that might make a difference. We have extrude along normals, and we also have their keyboard shortcut, which is helpful. So let's extrude along normals, and then if I activate that and move my mouse up and down, it will extrude those accordingly. So you don't have to use this, you don't have to just use the shortcut keys. I found when I was getting used to it, I would press the space bar, find what I wanted to, so bevel, and if I go to bevel edges here, I can bevel the edges of those polygons. There we go. And again, I've got my tool options down here where I can set it individually. I can set the amount of segments I want it to bevel, and so on and so forth. We have sharp and pitch and arc, etc, etc, all sorts of different options on that one. I'm not going to go through everything. I'm just giving you a general flavour for how to find tools, what they do, to get you into it, basically. Because if I was making a model at this moment in time, I think this would possibly be the worst one I've ever made. That's not true. I've made some real stinkers in the past. Okay, so that's a general little introduction of editing things, moving points around, moving faces around in different axes, rotating, scaling, and a general introduction of how to find and activate tools and the places to look where you can modify them. Okay, so next I think we'll probably have a look at cameras, because I keep thinking I haven't done cameras yet. I really ought to tell somebody about those. So I'll talk to you next. Okay, I'm just going to go into edit mode to start with. Sorry, object mode. And then we're going to sort of change our cameras about. So the cameras are controlled on the number pad. So if I press the 1 key, I'll get a front view. If I press the 3 key, I get a right view. And if I press the 7 key, I get a top view. So that gives me all my basic views. If I want to switch those views, if I want to reverse them, I can press the control key. So control 1 will give me the back view. Control 3 will give me the left view, and control 7 will give me the bottom view. So that's 1, 3 and 7, or control 1, control 3 or control 7. There we go. So just to come out of that view, you can just move your mouse with Alt and left mouse button for rotate, and you can always go back to them then just by pressing the key. Okay. Now there's another option which I found very useful once I discovered it, and that's the orthographic mode. And that's useful when you're when you say you have a reference for your model. So it might be a plan view of a house, or maybe a human, or whatever. And that's the 5 key, and that will switch you between a perspective and an orthographic view. So pressing 5 takes you to orthographic, and pressing 5 again will take you back to perspective. And that works in the perspective view, and it even works in the front views as well. So it's really useful, especially as you can then turn grid snapping on, and you can really very precisely put your vertices onto exactly where you want it on your reference. Okay, so that's the general view go around, and of course you can change your view types or render type up on the top right of that window. Now there is one more thing I wanted to look at, and that's the render camera. Now, I think this was much harder in previous versions of Blender, unless I didn't know about this option then. But now we can control it much easier. So if you press the 0 key, you will go into your render camera. Now this camera here is essentially your render camera. It's not the same as your view camera. They are entirely independent. Your view camera doesn't appear over here. It's just for, you know, your modeling options. So if I currently now press Alt to try and rotate that round, it doesn't work. It just switches me back to the view camera. And if I press the 0 key again, you'll see it's not changed. But over here, if we press the N key, we get our little pop out here and go on to view, and under or about halfway down the list there's camera to view. So that's locking the camera to the view. So now I can rotate within my viewport and it will change the angle. Now you'll notice I've completely lost where I am now. If I select an object, I will then be able to rotate my camera around it. Without it selected, it generally just goes around the last place I was looking. So if I move off there, it's not going to be quite right. But if I center on that and select on it, my camera will lock to it and I can rotate around quite nicely. And I can zoom in and out and so on and so forth. So this is very handy for them for, just to line up your model in the, for your render later. Previously, I either didn't know about this, which is distinctly possible, or it just wasn't there. And I found it quite hard to, get my camera in the exact place I wanted it. But now press 0, as long as you've got lock camera to view, you can really control where you're looking and where you're going to do it. Okay, I think that's about it. There's all sorts of things I could show you, but I don't want to overwhelm you, and I'm aware that we've probably gone through quite a lot to start with, but I hope that's enough to get you comfortable, and I hope it's enough to get you a bit more used to Blender and its slightly odd quirks. I found it really quirky when I started. I started in an older version, so maybe it's improved since, and I've just kind of gone with it. But yeah, I think it's worth pursuing and it's worth getting used to, because it's a free tool. You can talk about all the other tools and why they're better, or they've got this or they've got that, or they're industry standard or whatever. But when you're learning 3D, when you're starting out, there's nothing like a free tool over and above some of them cost you between $50 and $100 or pounds a month just to rent, basically. Anyway, that's enough of me rambling. As I said, I hope you found that useful. If you have any questions, ask me down below. If you learned something, give me a like. It really helps me grow the channel, which is the idea. And I'll talk to you again soon.